Gary, you and Jimmy ready? Andy, you and Russ ready? I'd like to officially call the meeting to order tonight, and my first order of business is to welcome everyone here with us. Thank you for coming out on hopefully what is no longer a rainy night. And those of you that have our agenda in your possession, I would ask you to turn your attention to item number 3. And at this time, which we always do, let us take a moment of silence to return favor, please. Amen. And at this time, I'll ask everyone to stand and face our flag. And tonight we will be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by Councilman Jimmy Hayes. Jimmy?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Our next item on our agenda is the consideration for our consent agenda. And tonight, our consent agenda consists of the following. Minutes from our January 4th and 11th, 2016 Town Council meeting. A temporary road closing resolution. A temporary waiver of noise resolution. A bond support resolution. A call for public hearing. A work session notice, and a tax release. And gentlemen of the council, each of you have had an opportunity to look over the consent agendas as I described, and at this time I will ask each of you if there are any additions, changes, or deletions to the consent agenda items. Gary?
No, sir.
Jimmy? Russ?
No, sir.
Andy?
No.
Okay, with that said, I will ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll make that motion.
All right, any further deliberation? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Like sign opposed, thank you. Item number 6 is a 7 o'clock public hearing. At the last town council meeting, we tabled the public hearing, and tonight this is a continuation. At this time, I will open the public hearing, and I will defer this conversation to be led by Andrew Carlton and Christina Walsh.
Thank you, sir. Good evening to the council and those in the audience. The Fletcher Street rezoning was initially heard by the Planning Board in November of 2015. At that time, they made a recommendation to the council that was presented at a public hearing in January, which was tabled as described by the mayor. We have taken that rezoning back to the Planning Board at the end of January, which is in your packet now with a new recommendation. That new recommendation is based on property owner input during the Planning Board meetings and the January public hearing. Mr. Hill is in the audience, and I would encourage him to speak in relation to his property at the end of Fletcher Street when we get to that point. But just to show what we're talking about in terms of the rezoning area and parcels in question, if you'll look at the overhead slides, initially the rezoning application was for, let's see here, 9 parcels along the east side of Fletcher Street over near the Food Line Shopping Center. This is a zoning map for that location as it currently stands with the existing zoning map for 2016. As you can see, all parcels in question are B2 general business. A lot of the uses on these properties are residential other than 2 vacant lots at the end of the street that are owned by Craig Jolly and the Moose Lodge that is adjacent to the Jolly properties. The notification for the public hearing in January was sent out to the entire neighborhood, including the owners of the Food Line Shopping Center. planning board initially in November recommended that only the parcels that are bounded in green be zoned residential or rezoned from business to residential, R6 general residential. So during the public hearing in January, we took some comments from Mr. Jolly, Mr. Hill concerning the parcels at the end of the street, and have since went back to the planning board to revisit the topic. And the following recommendation, let's see if we can get to it. I hope it's in here. I don't think this is the right presentation. But the slide that you have in your packets, unfortunately we don't have the right slide on the PowerPoint, but the map that you see in your agenda packets, you've got the first few parcels as R6 general residential, the Moose Lodge and the Jolly properties as B2 general business, and then the very last parcel at the end of the street, which doesn't pertain to the slides that you're seeing overhead, is being recommended to change to R8 single family residential. The reason being that R8 is different than R6 is because when you change from one zone to another, you have to have a contiguous nature. So the only other residential that last parcel touches is the R8 on the other side of the right-of-way. So the first few parcels, I think there's 5 there or so, maybe six parcels, would be changed over to R6 general residential. 3 parcels, the Moose Lodge, the Jolly parcels, would remain B2 general business, and the last parcel at the end of the street would go to R8 single family residential. And it's a sad circumstance, but recently there was a fire on Fletcher Street just this previous Friday, and that really shows the reasoning of why staff chose to make this rezoning application, and that was to protect the residential rights of these properties on Fletcher Street. In the case of that particular property, now that it has been burnt down with the current zoning, it would not be allowed to be built back as residential since it's B2 general business. So that was really the underlying logic of why we chose to bring this application to the planning board and now to you. And I do apologize for not having that particular slide, but the right slide is in your agenda packets.
Questions from the council for either Andrew or Christina? R8.
Just one
Yes,
question.
go ahead.
These changes, the planning board did approve that?
They did.
Okay.
The property that previously was B2 and now is being proposed to be changed to R8. Whose property is that?
Pauline Hill.
Okay. And I think Mr. Hill or Mrs. Hill both requested that, right?
They did not request it initially, but at the public hearing in January, they mentioned that they would prefer for their parcel to be residential, and Mr. Hill is here tonight.
And I spoke to him briefly, and I believe that, Mr. Hill, that's basically what you said to me, is you're hoping that the council will rezone it back to R8, which will allow the current use that it was before it was rezoned to B2. Okay. Mr. Jolly satisfied?
Yes.
Okay. This is a public hearing, ladies and gentlemen, and at this time I will ask the general public if anyone has a comment they would like for the town council to hear and to consider. So, Mr. Hill, do you have anything you would like to say to the town council before I call for a motion?
I already wanted to change back on the zone, that's all I wanted.
Okay.
Get back to the residential like it is.
All right, great. Okay, and Jim, you got the Mr. Hill's name, right? All right.
What's his first name?
Is it Paul?
Say it again, sir.
What's your first name, sir? Your first name?
Paul Hill. Thank you.
All right. Okay, thank you, Mr. Hill. Any other comments? Either pro or con? Okay, in the absence of which I'm going to close the public hearing. Ask the council if someone would favor me with a motion.
motion
to,
to accept it as presented.
okay, great, okay. We have a motion on the floor. Any additional discussion? Okay, in the absence of which, all those in favor of the motion on the floor signify by saying aye. Aye. Like sign opposed.
Now, with the rezoning and text amendments for zoning code changes, there is a consistency statement that Christina will go over that was approved for recommendation or recommended for approval by the planning board. What the consistency statement does is relates the changes that were made here tonight, or being proposed here tonight, back to the comprehensive plan, which is a requirement in the general statutes that we make sure all text amendments and rezonings are reflective of what we chose as the vision and the comprehensive goals of the town when we did that plan.
I placed at each of your seats a copy of the consistency statement, so I'll just briefly go over that. With your vote, you voted to approve the planning board recommendation as presented, which rezones 5 parcels to R6 general residential and 1 parcel to R8 single family. The other 3 parcels aren't listed on the consistency statement because they will remain B2 general business. With the next part of the consistency statement, the requested zoning action is consistent with the Town of Wilkesboro 2008 Comprehensive Land Use Plan because it relates to the following policies. Growth Management Policy 1.5, which talks about promoting mixed compatible uses for residential, commercial, etc., and other housing types to foster attractive, safe, and pedestrian-friendly neighborhoods. And the Policy 1.6, this is to enhance community design standards, ensure that the quality and character of new land development is compatible with existing land uses, and also to maintain transitions between employment uses and residential neighborhoods. And on page 2, it states that the requested zoning action is reasonable and in the public interest because it preserves existing residential uses and encourages compatible development with neighboring residential properties. And Your Honor, this will require a vote and approval by the board as well as your signature.
Okay, you've heard the logic behind the statement of consistency. I will ask the council if there's any questions that you have for Christina or Andrew pertaining to what she just read. In the absence of which, I will call the question if someone would favor me with a motion to approve as presented.
I'll make that motion, Your Honor, as presented.
Okay, any further deliberation? In the absence of which, all those in favor of the motion on the floor signify by saying aye. Aye. Like sign opposed.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. White, Mr. Absher, if you'll take a seat. And the next item on our agenda, item number 7, is a Yadkin River Greenway update, and this will be presented by R.G. Absher and Charles White.
Thank you, sir. Welcome to council. We should say thank you for welcoming us. It was just a few short weeks ago that we appeared before you, the first time to give you an update on the progress of Greenway, the growth we've experienced since its inception back in '92. We gave you an update on the progress of the undergoing expansion of the Greenway to Wilkes Community College. And today we're here to share with you some information that we obtained over this weekend. RG and I attended a conference in Asheville about the Over-Mountain Victory Trail, the National Historic progress that is being made in its expansion along the route that the Over-Mountain Victory Trail men took in winning our independence in the 1700s when we kicked the British out of the nation at the Battle of Kings Mountain. A lot of topics were covered, And to be honest with you, I've seen this symbol over the years, all across the town and even along the Greenway. And until this weekend, you know, you've been close to something all these years, but all of a sudden it all falls together. And that's what really happened with me this past weekend. Of course, RG's been an integral player in this process for many, many years. And at this time, I'd like to show you a little video that's been put together by the Over Mountain Victory Trail Association and the National Park Service that we use to talk to potential landowners about the prospect of providing us easements. But I think it will also give you an overall of the big picture of what this program is trying to accomplish. You're ready, Chris?
It's an untold story. It's a story that you don't learn about in history books. It's a story that they're not teaching in the classrooms. And yet it is where the American Revolution was won, right here in our backyards.
I've thought about this many times. What was it that motivated a man to leave his home and walk for almost 2 weeks in order to chase down a British-led group and then to get my rifle and shoot at them? It took quite a bit of determination on their part, and also, I'm sure, fear of what might happen if they did not take this very dangerous duty.